Hello, good morning. I want to talk about today how can play therapy help you to access that mind body connection to help your clients who have experienced trauma. So, children and adolescents who've experienced trauma. And so, that's what I want to talk about today. Here's the thing. This is the thing that I like to challenge people to think about. What are the ways in which you are helping your child and adolescent clients overcome the negative impact of trauma? And most of us, I would say probably all of us, really want to have a way that really has a deeper level of change and for clients. So having that incredible success, helping your clients overcome and heal from the impact of trauma in their lives. And my experience has been that cognitive strategies alone do not fully address the impact of trauma because trauma is stored via sensory elements in those traumatic memories. So, what does that mean? That's what I want to talk about today. So, what that means is that trauma is experienced through sensory circuits. So, think about it this way. Have you ever smelled something that brought you back to some fond memories? Like for me, the smell of eggs cooking and bacon fat brings me right back to the campfire. When I was camping, when I was little, brings me right back to those memories. Like instantly, I immediately feel this rush of happiness and peace wash over me, and memories of waking up in a tent to the smell of bacon cooking and eggs cooking. And we would be in a tent and we would be in this secluded camping area because the only way we could get there was by boat. So it was this secluded cove and it was shady because we were kind of in the forest. And I would wake up in the morning and I would see my mom. I would go out and I would immediately know my mom was cooking eggs and bacon for breakfast, and that's what we would have. And it brings back a lot of fond memories for me. And all of that through smelling bacon cooking and eggs and bacon cooking in the morning bring me right back to that memory. Or think about times when you have seen something or felt something. So, through your sensory circuits of touch, smell, taste, what you hear, different things that have happened in your life that have brought you back to a memory that was activated through what you experienced through your sensory circuits. These are all ways in which memories are also connected with our sensory circuitry. And that same is true for trauma. So that's an important thing to keep in mind when you are working with children and adolescents. It's true for adults as well. And how can you use play therapy and expressive arts to help your client access some of that sensory information to help them heal in the treatment process? And thinking about the sensory aspects of trauma is really key to helping your clients heal. First and foremost is going to be safety, creating safety and helping them feel safe in the treatment process. The second thing is going to be understanding how trauma is also accessed. Those traumatic memories are also accessed through those sensory circuits. So let's see who's here today. If you're joining me live, go ahead and post your name in the comments. I'd love to see who's here. Post your name, where you're from, what population you're working with. Are you working with children who have experienced trauma? And what modalities do you tend to use when you're using play therapy to express and expressive arts? What framework or modality do you use in the play therapy process? If you're watching on the replay, go ahead and post your name and your comments, where you're working, what population you're working with. So let's see who's here. I'd love to see who's here. And I'm Kathy Spooner. I am a licensed clinical social worker and a registered play therapist supervisor here in the United States. And over the last 30 years working in the field with children and adolescents, I've learned a lot of ways in which it's important to have a theoretical framework that you're operating out of, and how do you apply that? So my goal at this point in life is to help you access your unique gifts and talents and how to bring that to the play therapy process using a theoretical framework and applying it with confidence, ethically and effectively, helping you to be able to be that superhero in your client's treatment walk, and helping them learn how to be the heroes in their lives and integrating parents. So that's one of the things that I love doing, is helping you to be that awesome therapist to your clients. I do that through trainings and supervision online. A lot of my trainings and supervision are online now. So one of the things that I'm going to talk about is a training that's coming up on Saturday, in which I use a neuroscience and attachment lens, accessing and understanding those sensory circuits and how it's important to develop a framework and use interventions that are going to take that into consideration as you are thinking about your interventions, you're thinking about how you're working with your clients. Those are all really important things to think about. And so I have a training coming up. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that. And a lot of what we talk about using the neuroscience and attachment lens is also the sensory aspects, and how you can make sure that you integrate that part of the treatment interventions with your child and adolescent clients. So first and foremost, what are the sensory aspects of trauma? Trauma is stored in the body and the mind. We know that from the work of the really well-known book Bessel van der Kolk wrote, called The Body Keeps Score. And so thinking about the sensory aspects of trauma is a really important part of the treatment process, because those sensory aspects are going to be trauma triggers. So, for example, if you have a client who has experienced sexual assault, and maybe during the sexual assault, one of her attackers was a smoker, the smell of smoke can be a trauma trigger. I have had clients who will see certain things. Like years and years and years ago, I worked with a staff member at a residential treatment program, and I was really young at the time. And I remember, so we were standing outside, and we were watching one of the counselors come and get one of the adolescent girls. And this was like the nicest counselor on the planet. He was so kind, so gentle, very knowledgeable. And because he was really kind of fatherly, he put his arm around the adolescent girl, and this was a long time ago. I don't think this would happen now. And rested it on her shoulder as he was walking with her to his counseling office. Her body language was relaxed. She seemed comfortable. If you looked at, her facial expressions, her body language, all indicated that she felt comfortable walking to the office with this counselor. What the staff person I was standing next to, though, said something that stuck with me, and I was in my 20s at the time. She said, watching him walk with her, meaning the counselor with the client, instantly reminds me of my own sexual assault, in which my father would walk me that way into a room in the house and then proceed to sexually molest her. So seeing that trigger, and she was much older than me, seeing that after years and years would still remind her, just what she saw would remind her and take her right back to that experience. The same is true for clients. So if you have a client who has experienced any kind of trauma and you're working with them on the trauma, and I would include medical trauma. So for example, if you have a young child who's had a lot of invasive medical procedures, that they will likely experience that as traumatic, not always, and it happens quite a bit. We don't tend to look for that one. I think we don't think about that one as much as it's really helpful to think about it. So let's say, I don't know, I think most of us have had this experience. So you go to the dentist office, you're in the waiting room, you hear the drill, you smell that dentisty smell. And I don't know about you, but immediately I have to go right into my self-talk, where I'm like, it'll be okay. You trust your dentist. It'll be okay. Because I can immediately feel my anxiety getting started, especially because I'm thinking, oh my gosh, I'm going to get that shot that's going to numb my gums. That shot hurts like the big dog. It hurts. And so I can immediately start sensing that, access those memories. Well, think about a child who's maybe had a lot of medical procedures. They see a doctor, they see the white coat, they see the hospital, they smell the smell. They're going to most likely get really anxious and overwhelmed and emotionally dysregulated because it's accessed those traumatic memories. So one of the things you want to make sure that you do is to explore those with your client. When you get to that point in the treatment process, when you are going to be exploring the traumatic event, it's not something you do right away. You have to build up to it. But when you get to that point, one of the things you want to make sure that you do is explore those sensory triggers. What sensory images and memories are connected with that traumatic experience? So that's, oops, I forgot to put my little banner up. So that's one of the things you want to make sure you do is think about trauma in terms of that mind-body connection. And a lot of what we do in the training that I'm about to do on Saturday, registration is closing soon, is we go through and we talk about different interventions that you can use, how you can use them, the different phases of the treatment process. How do you know when you're ready to get to that part in the treatment process where you're going to be exploring that aspect of the trauma, and how do you therapeutically hold that safely? Because that's part of the pacing. So we talk about that as well, using an attachment and neuroscience framework. So how do you do that with play therapy? So there was my early training was with the National Institute for Trauma and Loss. And William Steele and Melvin Rader, back in 2001, wrote a book called Structured Sensory Intervention for Traumatized Children, Adolescents, and Parents, Strategies to Alleviate Trauma. William Steele and Melvin Rader had developed this structured sensory intervention for traumatized children and adolescents and their parents. So they had a structured way but one of the key components was exploring and understanding that trauma is accessed through memories. So I'm going to read a quote from that book because I think it sums it up really, really, really well. When memory cannot be linked linguistically in a contextual framework, it remains at a symbolic level for which there are no words to describe it. In order to retrieve that memory so it can be encoded and given language and then integrated into consciousness. So this is where it's the sensory part first that doesn't have language. So in order to get to that part where you can begin exploring through cognitive avenues, first, what they're saying is first it has to have symbolic representation in order to externalize it and consciously or cognitively process through it. So I'll go back to reading the quote. It must be retrieved and externalized in a symbolic, perceptual, or iconic form. So to me, that's one of the benefits of using play therapy and expressive arts is being able to, you don't necessarily have to have language associated with the memory in order to resolve that traumatic memory. The reason for that is because you can access it first symbolically without necessarily using, having memory attached to it. So think about it in terms of implicit memories don't have language attached with them. So sensory memories are not going to have language attached with them. You have to have a process in which there can be symbolic representation so it can be externalized and then processed and resolved that way. You can do that through play therapy. I have seen children, when I've used child-centered play therapy, the young children, they will use the play to help externalize and process through things that don't necessarily make sense to them. That's one of the therapeutic aspects of play, is that children use play. They use the play process to help them make sense of what's going on in their life, what things that have happened to them, have try out different roles, work through different challenges. They'll use that play in order to do that. So if you're using child-centered play therapy, you have that framework that you're using to help you navigate that process for your client. I like to use more of an integrated approach when my clients are a bit older, like 8, 9 and older. And so to me, it's still important to have a theory model that I'm working out of, and because that provides the framework. And so if I use an attachment and neuroscience framework, then that I typically root it in child-centered play therapy, and then I use more of a neuroscience and attachment lens to help me navigate that change process, understand what's going on, understanding the neuroscience aspect of sensory circuits and how those activate traumatic memories. And then once those traumatic memories are activated, they may overwhelm and trigger those traumatic responses of emotion dysregulation, of avoidance, of intrusive memories, even flashbacks. All of those things can be triggered. So you want to make sure to explore those. And using a neuroscience and attachment lens can help you create that framework so that when you're applying the interventions, you have a framework to apply those with. And to me, that brings us to the ethical aspect of using play therapy with trauma. Is kind of and how can you be effective is making sure what you're doing is kind of rooted in some kind of theoretical framework. And to do that, it's really important to make sure you get some good training. Like the training that I got years ago was through the National Institute for Trauma and Loss, using their structured sensory intervention framework that's rooted in neuroscience. And so that's a lot of what I work out of that model, and how to help your clients go through the different phases of treatment. What are your roles in each phase of treatment? What type of intervention? How do you want to pace it? All of those things are important to think about. And to me, training and getting some good supervision or consultation will help you. Training gives you the knowledge. Supervision and consultation helps you learn how to apply that with your specific clients, recognize themes that are going on in the play, and what is based on your clients' responses in the play sessions. How are you going to respond to that? How do you integrate parents or caregivers or guardians into the treatment process? What is that going to look like? Why is it important? All of those things are really necessary when you're working with children, and also when you are working with children and adolescents who've experienced trauma. Because one of the things that I hear really frequently when I'm providing trainings and the supervision and consultation is, what happens if they get dysregulated, or what happens if they dissociate? How do you know? And those are all things that training and consultation can help you learn how to effectively navigate with your clients in order to be really effective with your clients. So that is it for today. Let me just do a recap. Trauma, first and foremost, has sensory aspects in the memories. In the traumatic memories, there will be sensory aspects, and those are likely going to trigger a traumatic response. So the emotional meltdowns, dissociation, intrusive memories, those sensory components of the traumatic memory, if you don't identify them and help your client understand what they are, you are missing a big piece of the puzzle, and for really taking your clients to the next level in their healing process, getting to that post-traumatic growth, not gross. So really, it's important to think about those sensory systems. Also, play therapy is one of the most effective ways that you can help children, even adolescents, work through those, identify those sensory components, and work through those traumatic memories, develop coping skills. All of those things are an important part of the treatment process. Using play therapy and expressive arts can be a really amazing way to help your clients heal. And to be completely honest, I use expressive arts with my adult clients as well. In the past, when I've worked with adults with trauma, you can see all my sand tray miniatures behind me. Sand tray therapy is one of my favorite ways to help children and adolescents, even adults, really get into and explore those traumatic memories and explore those sensory aspects of the traumatic memory. And then finally, being an effective and ethical child and adolescent therapist is going to require an investment of your time and financial resources. Most of us as mental health professionals have not gotten training in our graduate school programs. Some people have, if you've been fortunate enough to attend a university that had that play therapy in their coursework. Most of us have not. So we've had to really invest time and money to learn how to use play therapy and expressive arts with our child and adolescent clients. And the reason that's really important is because you want to make sure your model that you're using is grounded in some kind of a theoretical framework, because theory drives application. And it's part of the clinical decision-making process that you're going to use in order to help you figure out what's going on with your client. So training gives you the knowledge, supervision and consultation give you the kind of hands-on, how do I take that knowledge and apply it specifically for my clients? So that is it for today. So if you're interested, I do have the training coming up. The registration is closing soon. It'll be closing on Friday. So you want to make sure to register soon. I still have spots available. It's going to be online, highly experiential, to learn some activities, have group discussion. To me, that's one of the really nice things about the online trainings, even the in-person ones, but a lot of us have moved to online, is that group interaction with your peers. What are they saying? It really enhances your learning. And so there's going to be lots of experiential activities and group interaction to help you really take the information and figure out how you want to use it in the work that you're doing with your clients. So registration is closing on Friday. I will not be offering this training in 2022 again. I'll probably, next time I offer it will be sometime in the new year, 2023 at some point. So if you're interested in the training, you have questions, feel free to message me. I'm happy to get back to you. You can hop over to my website, check out more information about the training. My website is rrhcounseling.com/courses. There's 2 versions of the course. One has the continuing education hours. One of them does not. So if you don't need the CEs, there's a less expensive version. If you do want the CEs, make sure you look at which version that you're signing up for. All righty. I will see you next week. Bye.